Welcome to an Inside Job. Again, I want to thank LATV, Kyle, Jack, Jane, Robert. They've been they're just a lot of support. Taking care of this, but also just talking before they're really up for this thing. So I'm your host, Ron Brown. I will introduce Justine in a moment. But first, I'd like to just give you this. Of course, it's on addiction and in any form. So this is a quote from Dr. Gabor Mate, MD. His book is Realm of the Hungry Ghost. And he says about addiction: biological, chemical, neurological, physiological, medical, social, political, economical, spiritual. And I found that to be true. There's so many angles to this thing, and it just seems to get worse and worse. But anyway, thank you, Justine, for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
As usual, I think it takes a lot of guts to come on here and talk about yourself, but she was up for it right off the bat. So thank you very much. So I'm going to ask you the usual questions, and first one, how old are you?
I'm 31.
You look 23, all right?
23, I'll take it. Some people
Okay,
say you look like you're 16, but I'm 31.
Yeah, thank you. How old were you when you began with drinking or smoking or?
I started drinking my freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
And then I really got into drugs my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
So 17, 18.
And the drugs were?
Primarily OxyContin.
Yeah.
But you know, I smoked pot, did some cocaine, but I became addicted to OxyContin around the age of 18.
18.
Yep.
And how did that happen?
How did that happen? Well, I mean, I was a kid that was restless, irritable, and discontent, as they would say. What I mean by that is I was restless. I couldn't sit still. I was irritable. Everything pissed me off. I was discontent. I always wanted to be somewhere other than where I was. So I've heard a lot of people describe it as like they can't be in their own skin. They just need to get out of their skin. I mean, I was sort of a rebellious kid. I did really well in school, but I was rebellious. I guess I sort of had that like experimental spirit. However, I tried OxyContin because I didn't know what it was, and other people in my group of friends were doing it, and it sounded like a fun thing to try. And then I became physically addicted pretty quickly. So I was, I had what they refer to as an allergy. So I had an abnormal reaction to it. Not like if I got stung by a bee and I started, breaking out in hives. For me, it was I needed more and more and more. That was the abnormal reaction. And I started experiencing physical withdrawal from not having it pretty quickly, because OxyContin is a very heavily addictive drug.
Yes.
And I was not really aware of that when I said, oh, I'll try this,
What year was that?
It was my senior year in high school. So I'm not sure the year, but I was 18.
Yeah, I was just asking to understand how the oxys were running then.
Yep, so 2003, I think, was the year I graduated.
So there was plenty of them.
Yes, it was very readily available in the city that I grew up in.
Yeah, which is where?
Medford, Massachusetts.
Oh, Medford, yes. Yeah. So you didn't get hurt at all and get them that way? It just, you didn't know what it was, and
Right.
that was
so,
it.
I mean, OxyContin is basically synthetic heroin.
Right.
At that point in my life, if somebody had said, try heroin, I don't believe that I would have said, oh yeah, okay, so easily. But somebody said, try OxyContin, there wasn't that negative connotation with it that heroin has.
Right.
So I was willing to try it. And then as I got further into my addiction and became physically addicted, I was willing to go to the heroin because I needed to get high. I needed to not be sick. And OxyContin is a lot more expensive to get on the streets than heroin is. It's much more regulated now from what I hear. Of course you can still get it, but you know, at that time it was everywhere.
Right.
And I think now heroin is so much more available because OxyContin sort of brought that back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, at least for my generation.
Yeah. Yeah. So you could only buy it for so long because it was expensive. And then, so what age did you start smoking heroin, or?
I snorted heroin and then I was shooting IV heroin. I was an IV heroin user. So I would say I only was on heroin for about 1.5 years, 2 years. It took me down. Once I went to the heroin, I went down really quick. I mean, I was down while I was using the OxyContin as well, but I was able to sort of keep up appearances and function to some degree. Once I went to the heroin, it was pretty difficult for me to maintain.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you working, may I ask, or?
I was working. I couldn't really hold a job. You know, I caused a lot of damage in that area. So I went from job to job. I also caused damage with my friendships, with my family. So there was a huge time where I didn't talk to my mom at all. I caused a lot of pain to my dad, especially at the end, because once I got to a certain place, I was lying to him, telling him that I was sober, and obviously I wasn't. And there was a long period of time where I hid from them that I was a drug addict at all. I moved out of my dad's house when I was 18, and I moved in with my boyfriend at the time, and so that's where I was living throughout my entire opiate addiction period. So
of course he was using, and...
Yep, he was using as well. He's actually dead now. He died when I was 3 years sober. So that was a big reality check for me. I mean, you hear all the time that this is a life and death disease, but to see the person that you lived with every day for 7 years, you know, and that would have been you too, you know. So
an OD.
Yep.
I take it. Yeah. Some rough stuff. So you knew you had a problem early on. You knew you had a problem. I mean, if somebody's shooting dope, they know they got a problem, right off the bat. So I'm sure it took you some places that you didn't want to go. Yeah,
it took me a lot of very dark places, and I would say I knew I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, but I have a brain. Part of my sickness as a drug addict and an alcoholic is that my thinking is distorted, and like you mentioned in that quote at the beginning, it's a mental disease, it's a spiritual disease, it affects my brain, it affects every part of me. So my brain would tell me, yes, you're physically addicted to heroin, but you could really stop if you wanted to. It doesn't matter that everybody else who's ever been addicted to heroin can't. Like, you know, that ego place in me, my brain tells me the lie that I can quit if I really want to. And so for me, what happened is, you know, I had lots of negative consequences from my drug addiction, like I had mentioned earlier, you know, loss of relationships, loss of jobs, loss of value of myself, loss of morals. You know, I stole, I lied, I cheated, I hurt a lot of people. But eventually, what brought me to my knees was just that self-hatred, you know, that complete loss of spiritual values, of self, of the truth. I didn't know what was the truth and what was a lie anymore. I was completely and utterly lost.
Yeah.
At the end. So.
Yeah, that's some rough stuff. I had a question, I forget what it was, and it was a good one too. Maybe it'll come to me. Let's see, next question. So, what age did you get sober, and how long have you been sober? Just a
I got sober when I was 24, so I've been sober for 6.5 years. It'll be 7 years in September.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. And you, we had talked, and again, we aren't promoting AA and NA, but everybody I take in here, they are from the 12-step programs, but we aren't promoting it. I haven't had any problems so far with some of the AA people saying, you shouldn't be doing that. So it's good. It's good. That's what I wanted to say. When we had talked, you had said that you detoxed yourself. How many times?
I don't know the exact number. That was something that I tried to do often. I had an event happen where my ex-boyfriend, who's passed on, who I had been living with, won $300,000 on a game show called Deal or No Deal in California.
300 grand.
300 grand. And so it was, you know, I was faced with the reality of, okay, well, we'll get ourselves together. Like that lie that I told myself that I could stop if I really wanted to, it was like now was the time to do that. And that money was gone within 6 months. Yeah. And we didn't make any purchases other than
Isn't that amazing,
drugs.
huh?
So the fact that I'm sitting here, that I'm alive, I'm truly, I'm blessed, I'm lucky. I'm absolutely lucky to be here. However, what ended up happening was I was so disappointed in myself for blowing that money. And then my resources, like everybody knew that the money was won. So it was like, well, why don't you have any money, blah, blah, blah. So then that led to other ways to get the money that were really demoralizing. And so that was when I started to try to detox myself, because another lie that I told myself was that I couldn't go to detox. I didn't want anybody to know that I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. I was very afraid of people's opinions of me, of people's judgments of me. So that's a miracle that I'm able to sit here today and talk so openly about it. I mean, it speaks to all the people in my life that have shown me love and shown me a way out. And there is a way out. You know, there's hope. It's rough stuff, like you said. It's really rough stuff. But there's the complete other end of the spectrum as well. You know, as rough as it gets, it can be just as beautiful on the other side. And
we haven't talked a lot, but we talked on the phone, but we were just talking here. You work hard at this thing. You go to how many meetings a week? Guess. Plus commitments.
Yep.
Plus sponsoring 4 people.
Yep, so I have a lot of people that I work with. I work a program. You know, I was lucky when I got into detox, and then I went to a rehab right from there, and then I went to a women's sober house. So I was in treatment for a good year. And And that was something that I really needed. I had forgotten how to socialize, how to go grocery shopping, how to live life. Like normal things seemed so overwhelming and so baffling to me, and I needed that structure, I needed that support. And then, you know, I ended up out here in this area. And, you know, again, you mentioned the anonymity thing. I've talked with a few people about, you know, what can I say and not say on TV. And I'm a little bit unclear about it, but, you know, like you had said, this is my story. This is how I got better. So I work on this on a daily basis. And I go to at least 5 meetings a week still, and I have almost 7 years sober. And I work on my internal self and my relationship with a higher power every day, all day long. You know, that's a connection that I need, because drugs and alcohol are bigger than me. They're huge. Look at all the people they're killing, all the lives they're taking, and not just the people who are dying from drug addiction, but their families, their friends, the people that they love. It's poisonous, and I can't fight that by myself. You know, I need a lot of love and support to fight that. And what I found is that I can't really fight it at all. I have to just sort of accept and let go, surrender, you know. I have to believe, okay, this is a part of my path, this is a part of my journey, and accept that as a part of who I am and move forward, you know.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's good days and bad days for all of us, but there's support, there's people who want to help, there's a solution out there, you know. And for me, that was a group of people that had been through the same thing I had been through, that understood, that really understood, because, you know, normal people who haven't actually been through alcoholism and drug addiction, they are compassionate, and I've received amazing graciousness from those people, and forgiving me for some of the horrible things I've done, and for reaching out and being supportive. But I'm talking about that connection of one alcoholic to another alcoholic, or one drug addict to another drug addict, who really understands that dark place, that darkness, and who has come out onto the other side. And to share in that solution is absolutely incredible. It's something I'm passionate about. That's why I'm so involved, and that's why I try to help as many people as ask me for help. It's an honor that somebody would want me to help them, because like I said, when I came in here, I had nothing to offer. I was completely bankrupt of any sense of self at all. I didn't know who I was lost, right? So to be able to have something to say to them, like, oh, this is what I did, I've been through this is how I did it, maybe this will help, and to just have that human connection. I mean, I was literally like isolated from the world for the whole time I was in my drug addiction. I mean, I was in the drug world, I wasn't in the normal world. So to be able to connect in a positive way is incredible. But for me, it wasn't just putting down the drugs and alcohol. It was changing how I think, how I look at things, my behavior, because I was a runner, ran away from everything. So to be able to have some tools to take a look at the truth in things and be able to face life is something that I never would have learned if I hadn't been through the suffering that I went through as a drug addict, because it's in recovery as a drug addict that I've learned all those things from this amazing group of loving people, you know.
Yeah. When I went into Knockeg, which is where in Ashburnham, 82, I was lost, I was slashed up, I was self-loathing, all the stuff, and walked out in the other room and sat down with some people out there, and they said, kid, you're not crazy, you just drink. You drink too much, and that's what it was back then. You stop drinking, and it's going to get better. And it has, you know. I've never had to look back once. And I work hard now, but in the beginning, I was, well, you were a year behind the walls, more or less, of AA and NA, right? Insulated at Elizabeth House.
Yep, in treatment, yep.
Right. I was 2.25 years behind the walls of AA. Trying out halfway house 6 months, then back at Narkeg, and I cooked downstairs and I lived upstairs. My point being, with the insurance company giving you a 7-day spin dry, it's almost impossible. Do you agree?
I mean, I know for me, I was lucky enough to be able to spend that amount of time in treatment, and I believe that I was lucky. I believe it's often hard to get that good treatment these days, but I do know that it's possible. You know, it's possible. I don't know a whole lot about insurance, so I mean, I don't know. I know there's a lot of people who are drug addicts who don't have insurance, you know, so
right.
I mean, that presents an issue. But I guess I would say that, you know, there is help that you can get out there if you want to get better. You know, if you want to get better, you can get better.
Yeah. Just to talk about that for a second, I know a lot of people. I've been around a long time, and so I hear a million stories, and a lot of addicts and alcoholics are on disability, and so they are on Mass Health, and that's the insurance, a 7-day spin dry. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, if you just stay in treatment for 7 days, first of all, for me, I know it. From an opiate addiction, it took a good year before I physically was able to function at a normal level. So, you know, you physically detox, and then there's sleeping problems, there's eating, there's all this physical recovery that has to take place, for me anyway, because I was a heavy heroin user. So it takes a long time, much more than 7 days. So if you just leave detox after 7 days and go back to the life that you left, there's no chance of recovery. You have to really, I mean, I changed my entire environment. It wasn't a geographical cure, like I'll move, but I surrounded myself with different people, a different environment. I had to make a lot of changes, you know, and I couldn't make those changes on my own. I needed help. And I think that's what the point that you're trying to make is that people need a lot of help to get better.
Right.
And I think that's the truth. You know?
And I believe the system is broke. It's broke, the whole system, because they're dying, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And as I said last week, I'm yelling and I'm screaming, and I'm going to be doing more than this, because 15 to 20% make it the first year, and that's out of even staying at a 6-month program. 15, something's wrong, and we're dying, and I would think we're dying at a higher level than people in Afghanistan, or I know people in car accidents. You know, I was thinking the other day, and you mentioned it, but I see a kid just like you, real early, getting on some perks or oxys, and they're around, like you said, you're going to find them, you're going to find something. Kids don't even know how to live. They're in high school, they're using that, you said, in that world, and they don't know how to live. Somebody has to show them how to live somehow, because I see the kids come in. You know, there's Orchard Street up this up the road from the UU church, and these young girls coming down with their kids. It's a house for women and their children. So they take the carriages down, and that's what it is, to have the children, or have the children come back, but they're all so young. And I don't know, but some are adamant, and you can tell with the girls coming down in the winter, you know, they want it,
Yep.
but
Yep, I mean, and that's a difficult thing to see, is a mom trying to get better with a kid who, you know, or they're trying to get custody back of their other two
Right.
kids while they've got one that they just
Right.
had, and I mean, I don't know the answer to solve a problem like that, but what I try to do is what I can do, so I'll go pick them up. You know, I'll go
Yeah.
drive them where they need to go.
right.
I'll help them if they ask me for
The
help.
girls at Orchard Street?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. So you know, no, I'm serious.
I mean, it's those places, there's houses and they have pros and cons, but there are resources, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that it's such a huge problem, it's an epidemic, and I don't pretend to know that I know the solution to it. You know, I think that you're right, that we are dying, you know, and I don't know the answer, you know, but I know that I've found an answer to my
Right.
problem, and so I try to share that as
Right.
much as I can, because that's all I can really say or offer. But it's a huge problem that I think people need to be aware of. I think people need to know about it. I think people need to be less afraid to talk about it. You know, I know for myself, like I shared earlier, it's hard for me to come on TV. I'm like, oh, it's local access, but like, who might watch it? Like, most of the people that I work with know my history, but not everybody does. You know, you get afraid of what people's opinions are going to
Right.
be, the stigma associated with it. It's a scary thing. But it can happen to me. It can happen to somebody who's rich and well educated. It can happen to somebody from anywhere, any way, shape, or form. You know, they say from Yale or jail, you
Right.
can be affected, you know. This is a disease that does not discriminate. And one of the things I always like to say is it doesn't discriminate who it affects in a negative way, but it also doesn't discriminate in who it can affect in a positive way. So, you know, if you can become sick, you can become better, you know. But I shouldn't say better, because, yeah, better, not cured.
Right.
It's an ongoing thing.
Right.
It's a daily thing.
Right. I'll be going for the rest of my life.
Right.
Hopefully. I know I don't want to go back there. That one thing about coming in, hearing the speakers, but also in discussion groups, have helped me to forgive myself. It's taken a lot of years to do that. But I can hear you speak and say, that happened to you, and this happened to you, and I've heard some horrible stories, just horrible stories, heartbreaking. You're about as far away as probably anybody would think a heroin addict would be, right? And that's why it's going to be so powerful for you to come on the show to show that. I'm about to ask a priest to come on. When I was in drying out up there, a priest, Father Paul, and I said, whoa, you know, this is a priest. I grew up Catholic. This is a priest, but
Yeah,
it
it can affect anybody, right?
anybody. Yeah.
And I would say that I would guess that most people who are going to see this know at least one person who has been affected by addiction in some way. You know, it's very prevalent.
I really like your philosophy. You sponsor 4 people, and I'm sure you sponsored many more. but it's working. It's working for you. You're hardcore AA or NA, I can tell. Which do you attend?
I attend AA primarily just because that's where I found the people that offered me recovery, offered a solution in this area. But I think it's whatever works for each individual. That's where I found my solution. But for me, I would say the way that I found that is not by thinking about it or figuring it out in my head or saying, you know, intellectually understanding it. It was by doing things, taking action, like calling the AA hotline to go to you know what I mean? Like getting myself into detox, and then there was always a next right thing to do, and just putting one foot in front of the other and doing that has grown into this beautiful thing. And that's what has enabled me to change my thinking and not think so negatively and self-hating and all of those, you know, patterns that I engage in. I've been able to change that to some extent and live differently. And it's not by figuring it out, it's by doing. By being present, by being in the moment, each moment, and doing my best, right? We all do the best that we can with what we have at the time.
Yeah.
I believe that. And I think that we're doing our best right now to share our own experience, and some people will agree with it and some people won't, but we're
Right.
here trying to affect positive change. And I have no delusions that I can save the world or
Right.
cure the addiction epidemic that's happening,
Right.
but I try to do what I can.
And which is being on here today.
Yep.
And it does, it takes guts. Yeah, yeah. So we already talked, I usually ask at the end, what do you think would help? But you've answered that already. And I complicate this thing. I always have, it just complications, that's my nature. That's it. I want to look in, around. You know, I do a lot of reading, a lot of writing on this stuff. But you do the basics. In talking to you, I know that. Yeah. Just AA, and I'm sure the 4 girls that you sponsor, they're all women. Yeah. And that's what they say. Woman sponsor woman, men sponsor men.
Yeah.
But it's such a big part of this thing, huh? That sponsorship, and
Yeah.
you still have a sponsor, and
Yep. I mean, and I would say that, you know, if you're somebody who's in active addiction, like you're struggling, you're addicted to drugs and alcohol, and you're watching this, or you're a family member of somebody who's struggling, who's watching this, and you don't understand what we're talking about when we say sponsor and this and that, like that's okay, you don't have to understand it, but to reach out for help, you know, to get into a detox facility, and they usually guide you pretty well.
right. Waiting for a bed in a place, you know, for 3 weeks sometime, that the person wants to get cleaned up, maybe again and again and again. But to be waiting that amount of time, you know, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You wait 3 weeks to get into a place, calling every day, every day, every day. You're going to go back out. You know, you're going to say, screw this, and there's not enough beds. There's not enough beds for people. This is all my opinion. There is not enough long-term care. I just think that's one of the most important things. It isn't possible for everybody to do that, but there's outpatient, like down in Worcester.
Yep, Ad Care is.
Ad Care, yeah. Spectrum.
So there's lots of places, and yes, you might have to wait for a bed, but there is treatment. You know, there is treatment out there. And so I guess I would say there's hope for anybody. There's hope for anybody.
Right.
If I can get better, anybody can
Right.
get better.
Right.
And it's a scary thing, and it's hard, and we're not perfect. I'm not perfect, you know, I mess up on a lot of days, but I don't drink or use drugs, you know, and because of that, I'm granted one day of a beautiful life, you know, and I truly do have a beautiful, beautiful life today.
You have a very good job, which you, just briefly, what do you do? Don't tell me the company or anything, just what do you do?
I work with, I'm a clinician, so I work with adults who have developmental disabilities. So some have Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder. A lot of them have behavioral difficulties. So I work on helping them to build positive replacement behaviors so that they don't have to be aggressive or self-injurious as a function of various different reasons. But so I work with them, and they teach me so much. You know, I've learned so much. I never would have imagined that that's what I would be doing. You know, it's not what I would have thought. I'm also a musician. I get to play music. I have a relationship with everybody in my family. My mom and my dad are divorced, but so I have one brother, and then I have two half sisters and one half brother. So I have lots of siblings, and my half sisters and my half brother are younger than me. So I've gotten to really be involved in their lives as they've grown up. My sister Claire is going to Harvard. My brother Rohan is going to art school out in Chicago. My little sister Abigail has her own Shakespeare company. She runs plays, directs plays. I mean, such cool stuff to be able to be involved in their lives and then want to share that stuff with me. And it sounds like, you know, if you had asked me what do you want when I got sober, I would say like money and a car and whatever, you know, like and I have some of those material things, but it's really those relationships, those connections with people that are so valuable. They feed my soul. My soul is fed, and I am free. I am a free human being, and I was stuck in the bondage of myself for so many years, and I'm freed of that. And I can't believe I can say that, but I can.
Have you come to terms with the 300 grand that you...
Oh, yeah, I don't care about
that. No? I guess that's about it, unless you have something to say.
No,
to say.
I would just like to say thank you, Ron, for inviting me on the show, and yeah, and thank you for all your work that you do to try to bring awareness. I think that it's important work.
Thanks. And we're going to get you down here, hopefully, if Jack and Kyle will let us, for you to play some of the songs that you have written, and a lot of them are about addiction.
Yeah.
I'm anxious to hear it. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
This is an inside job, the war on addiction, and I'll see you next time. And I think that's a wrap.
All right, cool.
You did well. You did very well.